Daf Yomi, Tractate Zevachim, page 93b, top of the page with the words Ha-tu-lamali. Ha-tu-lamali, matam kama, matam nishpach al haritzba v'asafrein tam kibus. Lefi she'ein tam kibus el adam shenizkaber b'chi v'oil hazaya. With regard to the statement that only blood that was collected in a vessel and is fit for sprinkling requires the laundering of the garment on which it's sprayed, the Gemara asks, why do I also need this? After all, it was already taught that if blood spilled from the neck onto the floor before it was collected in the vessel and it's sprayed on a garment, the garment does not require laundering. The Gemara answers this is not an additional halacha, but rather the Mishnah is saying, what is the reason? What is the reason that if the blood spilled from the neck onto the floor before it was collected in a vessel and the priest collected it and sprayed it on the garment does not require laundering? I have to ask my own question again. I don't understand what all this talk is about, requiring laundering or not requiring laundering. When something is dirty, wouldn't you wash it whether being required or not? I mean, who's arguing with laundry? I mean, who doesn't want to do laundry? It seems like, especially priests and people that are, in the spiritual world that are striving to be holier. Laundering is a natural desire to have clean clothing. You have to argue and spend pages of arguing whether you have to launder it or not. I mean, that's just been bothering me for these past few dafim that we've been just talking about this. It's just, I don't understand why there's so much talk about requiring laundering or not. It shouldn't even be an issue. Okay, now that I got that off my chest, let's go. This is because it only is with regard to blood that was received in a sacred vessel and is fit for sprinkling. The garment requires laundering. Royal hazayel muti mai muti kibel pachos. The Mishnah teaches it is only with regard to blood that was received in a sacred vessel and is fit for sprinkling that the garment requires laundering. The Gemara asks, as it was already taught that when disqualified blood is sprayed on a garment, it does not require laundering. This reiteration serves to exclude what? The Gemara answers it serves to exclude the case where a priest received less blood than is sufficient for sprinkling in this vessel, and less than is sufficient for sprinkling in that vessel, and then he mixed together the blood from the two vessels. In such a case, even though the combined amount is now enough for sprinkling, the blood did not become fit for sprinkling. Okay. The Tanya Rabbi Chalafta bar Shaul Omer Kidesh Pachos Bichdei Hazayim Bichdei Pachos. This is as it is taught in Brian with regard to the sanctification of water or purification. Rabbi Chalafta bar Shaul says, if a priest sanctified less than is sufficient for sprinkling in this vessel, less than is sufficient for sprinkling in that vessel, and he then mixed together the water from the two vessels, he has not sanctified it to become water of purification. In a related issue, a dilemma was raised before the sages. If a priest did this for the blood of an internal sin offering, collecting less than is sufficient for sprinkling in each vessel, and then mixing the blood together, what is the halacha? Is Rabbi Chalafta's statement about the water purification a halacha transmitted to Moses from Sinai? And we do not learn from such a halacha an application to a different matter? Oidima Hasamai taima dichsiv v'tav b'mayim ochanam dichsiv v'tav b'dam. Or perhaps, what is the reason there that the combined water purification is not fit for sprinkling? It may be because it is written about sprinkling the water and dip it in the water. Numbers 19:18, stressing that it is to be dipped in precisely the same water that was first placed in the vessel. This indicates that from the outset there must be an amount sufficient for sprinkling. If so, then here also there is comparable language employed with regard to the blood of the sin offering. It is written, and the priest shall dip his finger in the blood, and sprinkle of the blood, Leviticus 4:6. The blood will never lose its power. Does this prove that from the outset there must be sufficient blood for sprinkling? Tashima, the Gemara suggests, come here a proof. As Rabbi Zerika says, that Rabbi Elazar says, even in the case of the blood of a sin offering, if one collected two insufficient amounts and then mixed them together, he did not sanctify the blood to make it fit for sprinkling on the altar. And therefore, if it sprays on a garment, one is not required to launder the garment. Amarabe Tanya Vitova Mula Misapig Badam Achihe Badam Shiur Tivila Nikaro Minadam Shiba Inyan. Rava says it is taught in a brayso with regard to the internal sin offering, whose blood is sprinkled in the sanctuary. The verse states, and the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle of the blood, Leviticus 4:6, and there must be enough blood of the vessel for the priest to dip his finger in it, so that he does not need to wipe blood from the sides or of the bottom of the vessel onto his finger. The verse states in the blood, teaching that the blood is unfit for sprinkling unless there is a measure of the blood fit for dipping in the vessel from the outset, and the blood is disqualified if more blood is added to a vessel that initially contained less than the required measure. The verse states, sprinkle of the blood, which teaches that he must sprinkle of the blood that is mentioned in this matter, which is the blood in the vessel. Which is the blood in the vessel, blood in the vessel, blood in the vessel, blood in the vessel. Ve'itztrich lebichtav adam dichasav mavatav havanami avalpi teleka shiyuch tivil mikav dichasav adam. And it was necessary for the Torah to write the term in the blood as well as the term and the priest shall dip. As had the merciful one only written and the priest shall dip, I would say that if there is sufficient blood at the time of the dipping, even though there was not a measure of blood fit for dipping in the vessel from the beginning, it is nevertheless fit for dipping. Therefore the merciful one writes in the blood to teach that there must be sufficient blood from the beginning. Because of and if the merciful one had written only in the blood, I would say that if at the beginning there was an appropriate measure of blood, it is not necessary for the vessel to retain a measure of enough blood throughout the whole rite. And even if he eventually wipes the blood off the vessel onto his finger, it is sufficient for sprinkling. Therefore the merciful one writes, and the priest shall dip to teach that there must remain enough blood to dip his finger each time. Minadam shebe'inyan למעוטי מים הרוב ולמעוטי שיריים שבאצבע ישראל לבלעזור. למה לבלעזור שיריים שבאצבע פסולין? The cited brisa states, the verse states, sprinkle of the blood, which teaches that he must sprinkle of the blood that is mentioned in this matter, which is the blood in the vessel. The Gemara asks, in order to exclude what was this mentioned? Rava said, this serves to exclude the remainder of the blood that is on the priest's finger after sprinkling, which may not be used for further sprinkling, as he must dip his finger in the blood again for each sprinkle. Rava continues, this supports the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, as Rabbi Elazar says the remainder of the blood that is on the priest's finger after sprinkling is unfit for further sprinkling. Amar le Ravin barav ada le Rav Amar talmidcha Amar Rav Amram Tanina Haya mizeh v'nitza hazaa miyado ad shelo hiza ta'un kibus mi shehiza ein ta'un kibus. Ravin barada said to Rav, in other words Rava, your student says that Rav Amram says, we already learn a braita opposing Rabbi Elazar's opinion. If a priest was sprinkling the blood of an internal sin offering and a sprinkle sprayed from his hand onto a garment, The halacha depends on the circumstances. If it's sprayed before he sprinkled, the garment requires laundering. But if it's sprayed once he has sprinkled, it does not require laundering. Mai, lav, achikamar, ad shlo gamar me'azois. Ton kibus, mishgamar azois, in ton kibus, lo. Achikamar, ad shlo yatsa, hazam yadoi, ton kibus, mishiyatzitza, hazam yado, in ton kibus. Rabin Bar Rav Ada explains, what? Is it not this that the Bright is saying if the blood sprayed on the garment before the priest concluded sprinkling? The garment requires laundering, even if it's sprayed from the remainder on his finger. But if it's sprayed once the priest has concluded sprinkling, it does not require laundering. This indicates the blood sprayed from the remainder on his finger requires laundering, so it must be fit for sprinkling. Rav replied, no. This is what the Braita is saying. If the blood sprayed on the garment before the sprinkling has left his hand, it requires laundering, but if it's sprayed once the sprinkling has left his hand, the remains on his finger does not require laundering. If it then sprays onto a garment, Eis ve'abaye gamar mi'alazois mikaneach yado b'gufa shel para. Gamir in lo gamar lo. Amarle gamar mikaneach yado b'gufo shel para lo gamar mikaneach esbo. Abaye raised an objection. Okay. Abaye raised an objection to Elazar's opinion from what is taught about sprinkling the blood of the red heifer in the Mishnah in Parah 3:9. When the priest has concluded sprinkling the blood, he wipes his hand on the body of the red heifer. Evidently, if he concluded sprinkling, yes, he does wipe his hand, but if he did not conclude sprinkling, he does not wipe his hand, even though a remainder is left on his finger. Evidently, this remainder is fit for sprinkling. Rava said to him, the Mishnah is to be understood otherwise. If he concluded sprinkling, he wipes his entire hand on the body of the red heifer. But if he has not concluded sprinkling, he wipes only his finger after each sprinkling. Bishloma gamar mekaneach yado b'gufo shel para shnema v'sarav v'paralina ela etzbo mekaneach amar Abaye b'svas mizrak mirdichtiv kafor izav. The Gemara asks, granted, if he concluded sprinkling, he wipes his hand on the body of the red heifer, as it is stated, and the heifer shall be burned in his sight, its skin, and its flesh, and its blood. Numbers 19, verse 5. Indicating that the remaining blood must be incinerated together with the flesh. But on what does he wipe his finger after each sprinkling? Since he must not wipe it on the body of the heifer, which might cause hair to stick to his finger, interfering with the sprinkling, Abaye said he wipes his finger on the lip of the bowl holding the blood for sprinkling, as is written, atoning bowls of gold. Ezra 1:10. The atoning bowls are so named because the priest wipes his finger on them, and the word kefore indicates cleansing by way of wiping. Sichul and 8b. And that's the end of the Gemara for that section, for that Mishnah. And now we start a new Mishnah. Zog the Mishnah, Nita Zala Oyo, Ad Shlo Shat Eino Taun Kibus. Mishehu Shat Taun Kibus Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Apropos, laundering the blood of a sin offering from garments onto which it's sprayed, the Mishnah discusses what is considered a garment. If the blood of a sin offering is sprayed onto the hide of an animal before it was flayed from the animal, the hide does not require laundering because its status is not that of a garment, which is susceptible to ritual impurity. If the blood sprayed onto the hide after it was flayed, it requires laundering. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Elazar Omer, Af mi shehufshat einu taun kibus el makom adam v'davar shu roi l'kamil tuma v'roi l'kibus. Rabbi Elazar says, even if the blood sprayed onto the hide after it was flayed, it does not require laundering until it is crafted into a vessel or a garment that is actually susceptible to ritual impurity. This is the principle with regard to laundering. A garment must be laundered only in the place where the blood is sprayed, and only if it is an item that is fit to become ritually impure, and only if it is an item fit for laundering. Kibus b'makom kadosh, u'shviras kli cheres b'makom kadosh, u'merika u'shetiva b'chli nechoishes b'makom kadosh, ze chomer b'chatos mikodshei kadoshi. With regard to the garment mentioned explicitly in the Torah, and the sackcloth and the hide, all of these require laundering, and the laundering must be performed in a sacred place, the temple courtyard, and the breaking of an earthenware vessel in which a sin offering was cooked must be performed in a sacred place, and scourging and rinsing of a copper vessel in which a sin offering was cooked must be performed in a sacred place. With regard to this matter, stringency applies to a sin offering more than it applies to offerings of the most sacred order. That's the Mishnah. Now we start the Gemara. Mina hani mili. How do we know these things? Yitana Rabbanan beged, and the beged. Minayin l'rabbis o mishehuf shahat tamadano asher yaze yizelea tichabes. With regard to blood sprayed on a flayed hide, from where are these matters, meaning the divergent opinions of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Elazar, derived? The Gemara explains they are derived, as the sages taught in the Braita. It is stated with regard to laundering, and when any of its blood shall be sprinkled on a garment, Leviticus 6:20, I have derived only a garment. From where do I include an animal's hide? After it was filleted. The same verse states, you shall launder that on which it shall be sprinkled, to include any item on which the blood is sprayed. Yachol shani marbe oil ad shelo hufshat tamud lomar beged ma beged haroi lekaver tuma afkol haroi lekaver tuma divrei Rabbi Yehuda. One might have thought that I would include a hide even before it was flayed. To counter this, the verse states garment. Consequently, just as any manner of garment is not unfit to become ritually impure, if one intends to use it, for example, making it a patch for his clothing, so too the requirement of laundering applies to any item that becomes fit to become ritually impure. When one intends to use it, as is a hide is fit to become ritually impure after it has become filleted. When one intends to use it for a rug or the like, this is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Elazar Omer beged eni ela beged. Rabbi Elazar holds that even after it is flayed, the hide does not require laundering. In interpreting the verse, he says, the verse states garment, and from this I have derived only a garment. From where do I include sackcloth?